How do you feel about this statement? Things are getting better. Do you see it that way? Do you think that life in general is getting better? Do you think that the world is getting better? We tend to see or at least look at the same thing, but sometimes see it in different ways. Let me share an example of that with you. When you look at this sculpture, what do you see? Early on, easily, you see two giraffes, very peaceful, docile looking creatures, but as you walk around the sculpture, you begin to see it a different way. Uh, Elephant, maybe a little angry, looks like he's about to charge. Um, the way we look at this determines what we see. And in many ways, I think life is like that. Um, we have a perspective. It may be one we've gained from our family, it may be one from our environment, it may be one that we have developed ourselves. But one of the things that God is trying to do through Scripture is to give us a perspective from Him. And so when Paul writes to the folks in Rome, he is trying to change their thinking. He writes about being transformed by the renewing of your mind. Uh, is that renewing your mind that we've been talking about, removing some negative things, putting in some positive things. And one of those comes from a scripture in Romans 8 and verse 28. And I think what that scripture is saying is this: it's getting better. I recognize that you may not agree with that. You may push back, you may resist that, and that's okay. Just hear me out, and you may decide later on you agree, or maybe not. Either way, it'll be okay, and we'll still be friends. It's getting better. Paul is writing from a very difficult life. He was often in prison, shipwrecked, beaten, left for dead, all sorts of things. But he seems to have this ongoing positive attitude based on a belief that it's going to keep getting better. In Romans 8:28, the verse that I'd like for us to kind of focus on today, for it to roll around in your mind, he says, "In all things, God works together for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose." In all things, God works for the good. Do we believe that, and how do we understand that? It's important to notice he's not saying that everything is good. Uh, Paul had been in prison. He's writing to people who had been split for a while. The Jewish Christians were forced out of Rome by an edict in AD 49. They've come back in 54. It's a church having a hard time learning to relate and get along with each other, different backgrounds, different practices, different beliefs. And so things are hard, kind of like things are hard now. We're adjusting to all sorts of things being different. Church is different. How we get together is different. Life is different. We're spending a lot of time at home, very little time out and about. And in the middle of all that, is it possible to think that God is working for good? It feels like maybe God's taking a vacation, that God's not paying attention. But Paul would insist that in all things, not that all things are good, but in all things, in every situation, God is still at work. It kind of helps me to think back to the creation story. God worked for 6 days, and on the seventh day, he rested. He didn't retire, he went back to work. That Sunday morning, God's back on the job. I think it's fair to say God does his best work on Sunday mornings. Some great things have happened on Sunday mornings. And God has been busy, and all through the Bible story, the common thread is God is at work, fulfilling promises, taking care of his people, arranging things to go in directions that he wants to go. So when you get to this verse, in all things God works for the good, maybe it helps to define good a little bit too. Maybe it's not always what we think is good, what feels good. Uh, my parents quite often imposed things on me that I did not think were good at the time. I recognize, however, they were good for me and they were helping to move me in a good direction. And I think that's what Paul is talking about. If you read the verses just after, he talks about being chosen and predestined and known, but it's according to his purpose. Those who love him and are called according to his purpose. God's going somewhere. And in everything that comes through our lives, he is working and arranging to help move us where he wants us to be. He talks about becoming more like the image of Jesus, the image of God. That's good. It's for our good. And God is constantly working to bring that about. Ephesians 1 verse 11 puts it this way. It talks about the plan of God, the plan of Him who works out everything in conformity with the purpose of His will. God is moving things in His direction, and if we are called according to His purpose, then we too are being moved in that direction towards some good things. Let me encourage you to ponder that possibility today. Think about what it would mean for life if you can go through your day believing it really is getting better. The church is getting better. The future is getting better. The best is yet to be. That perspective, that way of looking at this thing, I think will change how you experience your day and your life. Our Father has good things in store for us. That thought should make every day better. It's getting better. God's making it that way. Let's enjoy that thought today.